Howard always insisted that he did not believe in supernatural occurrences of any kind. Ghosts, in the traditional sense, he attributed to superstitious credulity on a childish, primitive level. On one occasion, I decided to put his skepticism to the test, so I conjured a ghost. I didn't resort to trickery, however. I merely took advantage of our surroundings. You still maintain that there's no truth to the supernatural world?
Of course.
Despite all the weird and bizarre stories you write, you don't believe in any of it?
Balderdash. Complete and utter nonsense. All purest fiction, the lot of it.
Howard, answer me this. Suppose you, for instance, you were seated on a grave like this, not necessarily this particular one, and a shape rose up out of the mound that you couldn't possibly mistake for anything but a ghost. Let's say it just hovered above the grave for a moment in vaguely human form. Say it didn't stay vague, but it coalesced into a very firm-looking specter with every lineament sharply defined and with eyes like holes in the skull. Would you doubt its authenticity and fail to be badly shaken?
Shaken? Hardly. Of course not.
But what would you think? How could you hope to explain it?
Well, there would be a great many ways to account for it, and they would have nothing to do with my emotional state at the time.
Many ways? Apart from a supernatural explanation, I can't think of one.
It would be, of course, difficult to explain, but that's beside the point. I'd know instantly, beyond the remotest possibility of doubt, that it couldn't be a ghost. So I'd start searching about in my mind for some other explanation. I can think of several that would not stretch credulity 1/10 as far as a surrender to blind superstition.
Name one.
If someone suggested a visit to the graveyard in question, I would consider him highly suspect. I would take very seriously the possibility that he'd planned it before my arrival as a skillfully contrived hoax.
You must have taken that brief talk you once had with Houdini quite to heart. Do you think even Houdini could have made a wisp of mist arise from a grave and take on a form and substance right before your eyes?
Well, to begin with, that illustration you cite is highly illogical. You're implying such an occurrence even could take place. No matter how much you may add to it as you go along, I can assure you that supernatural manifestations are always illusory. There always has to be some entirely logical explanation for everything that appears strange and unusual. Any schoolchild knows that.
Even if I'm talking about an occurrence that's hard to imagine taking place, what if it did? It's just how you'd feel if it did that has me interested.
Well, I've told you. I probably picked out a needlessly complicated explanation. There are a few simpler ones. Some local prankster.
I know what you're going to say. Some fool might be flashing a projected image from a distance and manipulating it to somehow create an illusion.
It would indeed occur to me.
But suppose the shape was just too close and too real. Suppose you could detect the putrid odor of its breath. Suppose it reached out and grabbed hold of you. Some unmentionable or unnameable horror.
If some unnatural monster had existed, even the most morbid perversion of nature need not be unnameable or scientifically indescribable. It still wouldn't shake my conviction that supernatural entities are an absolute absurdity, and there would have to be some other way of explaining it. Look, over there. There is your ghost. Would you expect me to be startled by that?
No, I guess not. It isn't remotely comparable in ghostliness to the witches we saw in a twilight glow in Inwood about 6 years ago.
Oh, you mean the cloisters? Well, I'll have to confess that did shake me up a little for a moment.
Did you ever see anything so peculiar? Cloisters, the sparkling twilight, the thick woods.
I remember it.
Then there were the witches. 3 bent and fragile-looking old women sweeping up the fallen leaves with their long-handled brooms. There was a twilight glimmer at their backs, and they wore what looked like jet-black conical tapering hats. To this day, I can bring back the memory of the scene. It was as if those 3 crones were engaged in clearing away some of the underbrush in preparation for a dark ritual.
In all probability, they were engaged in tidying up the estate.
And why would they feel they could more easily accomplish that while looking so much like witches? It could hardly be staged for our benefit, since we weren't invited there individually.
Mrs. Gamwell wraps a wet cloth around her head when she has some dusting to do. A makeshift turban like that could look from a distance very much like a witch hat tapering to a point.
Well, how about the brooms? They seemed long-handled enough to accommodate 4 or 5 witches, accompanied by one of their infernal black imps. I should think they'd rake leaves with a hoe or a wire mesh broom.
Silly Belknapius, brooms can be of almost any length, and a long-handled one would be ideally suited to a task like that. After all, a broom is a broom is a broom. I think I have an idea for the next weird tale.
Have you now? Pray tell.
Oh, I dare not speak it.
Why ever not?
It's